We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations.
The other day, Elon Musk said his 20-year-old son is, quote, dead. This is what the billionaire had to say during an interview with conservative commentator Jordan Peterson. Now, Musk's daughter, who changed her gender to female and her name to Vivian Jenna Wilson in 2022, had dropped Musk's last name and saying that she no longer wishes to be related to Musk in, quote, any way. Here is Musk describing that transitioning process in an interview.
It wasn't explained to me that puberty blockers are actually just sterilization drugs. Anyway, and so I lost my son, essentially. They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right, so the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's lots of people in that situation now.
Right.
It's not pretty, and lots of demolished kids.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be the final straw. All right, so let's.
So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that.
Now, in the hours after that interview airing, Musk reshared a post on X that read, "I'm 100% in support of adults pursuing whatever gender they please by whatever means they like. More power to you. However, we will look back at this time when doctors and quote professionals pressured parents to perform surgery and give hormones to children. With great shame and regret, the detransition stories are just starting, and they are devastating. These stories always include the parents and children being bullied into making irreversible decisions," end quote. In his mission to destroy the woke mind virus, Musk tweeted yesterday, "They should actually teach this in biz school. Polite greeting, name, relevant personal link, manage expectations." He's discovered basic social skills. Good for Elon, very happy for him. I'm concerned that him and a lot of people in his, whatever you call it, I don't know, the Musk guys, they have, it's really a lot of conservative people and right-wingers at this point. People in my DMs were saying that, you're useless because you're 28 and you have no children. This idea that reproduction and fertility is what gives someone value. You didn't lose your child because they can't have kids anymore. Maybe he shouldn't have so many kids with so many women and be an absent father, and his kids would actually talk to him and he could have influence over their lives' decisions. Having your son only be your son if they're able to reproduce is ridiculous. It erases them as a human being.
I don't think that's what he was saying at all. And we should be clear here, this is important because this is Elon Musk's entire reason for becoming a conservative and a supporter of the right and now a major financial backer to Donald Trump. This is his origin story. He was not politically involved. He was Democratic, a centrist Democrat before this. He has moved to the right because of the personal experience that he had where he had a child transition, change genders, and he says go through this medical process that he now thinks was exploitative and bad and akin to sterilization. And he regrets, he had a son and he thinks he's lost that son, and the person, now a daughter, no longer wants to have anything to do. He didn't abandon the child or any of his children. This child does not want to have anything to do with him. And look, it's not other people's families are not my business, is my general reaction to any of this. And I don't know at what age, the transition started to take place. Now, he says he has no problem with adults doing it. I have no problem with adults doing it. And I don't know what age this begun, but there it is.
Yeah, I think by speaking publicly about personal matters and being such a staunch advocate against other families making decisions for their kids, he opens the door for us to criticize him.
Well, but he feels duped by what he calls the medical establishment, by therapists, doctors, etc., who did not in his view, again, I don't know what actually happened, but did not sufficiently explain the consequences of going down this gender transition route. And the fear
But he doesn't say that. He doesn't say they lied about his child.
Well, he said they misled him. He said he didn't understand it was going to do
not his
it was going to be
child.
sterilizing.
His child very likely knew that. The child's mother very likely knew that. Elon Musk didn't speak to that. We can't say that for certain. He is against the transgender movement. He is against having puberty blockers for children. It is pushing someone to have an identity and to develop physically in a direction that they don't want if they can't get access to puberty blockers.
It's just not the conservative movement that's against it. It's like several major studies conducted of the efficacy of puberty blockers in a host of European countries. They're now going back on their very trans-affirming guidance because science showed that this was not improving the mental health outcomes for young people, and it was hard to argue that this was medically indicated or necessary. Again, so that it's not just conservatives who are concerned about this, and the concern is of young people who are. And I saw another post where Elon clarified that at the time the child his son was gay and autistic, and he was perfectly accepting of those things, and worries that young people in those situations are being pressured or being too quickly pushed into making body-altering medical decisions that they're not fully aware of and will come to regret it later. That is the concern that people have with what has gone on.
I don't think anyone has been bullied to become transgender. I don't think anyone has, as a parent, been bullied to force
Maybe bullied is the wrong word.
I don't think anyone's pressuring parents to force their children to transition. And there's no cases where doctors have forced this upon their patients. That's all made up.
Well,
I know people who have transitioned and then detransitioned. In the same way that I know people that have gotten breast augmentations and then reversed that. And people who have gone down career paths or started college and then changed their mind. The idea that that makes this something we shouldn't do is ridiculous. Elon Musk's really upset about the taboo nature. He's not used to the idea that someone can change, and I think that's where this is coming from.
Well, but wouldn't you want the person to be really sure that this is in their best interest and be very understanding?
Why do you think they are?
Conservatives don't want to force breast enhancement or any other bottle on young people. They don't, And the people who get those are sure at the time they get it, in the same way that children who transition are sure at the time they get it. Okay, but most people, the reason they bring up the peer pressure aspect is that is the social contagion aspect of gender dysphoria, where now, because it's become more acceptable, you have a significant number of young people not going through with the surgery or the medical interventions, but suddenly changing their gender or identifying as a different gender and all of that. And most of those people, according to studies, end up just it's a phase and end up just identifying as the gender that they were born as. And so the fear is that if you suddenly scoop up all those people who say, wait, I'm a different gender, and then you throw puberty blockers or surgery at them, you're going to end up scarring a whole host of people that actually were going to end up being perfectly fine and feeling comfortable and normal in their own bodies. Puberty is a difficult thing. Young people have bad, men and women. When your body changes, it's like hard and it's difficult. It doesn't necessarily mean the fear is this new model saying, oh, there's something wrong with you. Here's what you have to do because of that, when it's just very ordinary and normal to feel uncomfortable in your own skin for periods of time. And you grow out of that. Most people grow out of that and are happy the way they are. There are, I grant, a number of exceptional cases where I'm sure a person, even a very young person, would absolutely be helped by having surgery and puberty blockers. And again, it's not really my business. I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. I'm certainly there are cases where it is the right medical option for you, and I'm not going to prohibit it based on that. But I just think we ought to be really careful here about what we're getting young people into.
Regret is higher for elective surgeries. Most of these are plastic surgeries. A lot of people aren't electing for other kinds of surgeries. Breast reconstruction, it's 9.1% breast augmentation, 10.2 to 33%.
Well, people shouldn't have done those either, right? Like, what is that?
That in cases where someone has transitioned, who detransitions, is 1 to 8%. The percent of the population in the United States that is transgender, a conservative estimate would be 5%. So among those, not everyone transitions. Those are just people who identify with another gender. They don't go through puberty blockers or these treatments. So why, if we believe families should get all of the information and should make the decision, and that peer pressuring them when their child has gender dysphoria to transition is wrong, which I don't think people are doing that. People are saying you have this option. That's what medical professionals are doing, which is who Elon calls out. That's the reality. So are we peer pressuring people to make a decision in the other direction based on Elon Musk's opinion that the data wasn't enough in the case of his own child? Why are we now peer pressuring people in the other direction if peer pressuring is wrong? Can't we just let families make their own decision with the information they have?
Well, then we're not disagreeing. I think families should make their own decisions based on the information they have. I think medical experts should be honest with families about what the procedures entail and what the science about it says, and then it's your body, your choice, and you should make an informed, you and your family, if the kid and the family and the doctors are all on the same page, you know what? If it's good or bad, doesn't really pertain to me. You get to make that decision. Of course, there are going to be cases like in the Elon Musk case where the family and the child disagree, and you're going to have medical experts that say, well, this is a good idea, and medical experts that say that's a bad idea, and then that ends up being a very tricky situation for public policy, because then that does involve public policy. If everyone's on board with it, I just don't care at the end of the day. It's not my, I'm not responsible.
Yeah, I think that the
But if
heart
there's
of it,
dissent, then it has to be, that's where the policy comes in. And that's where many people on the right, and not just on the right, it's much bigger than just the right. Again, Europe has reviewed these policies now, European countries, and found a lot suspect with them, is that the model is too affirming, is too quick to recommend to young people who are depressed or LGBT or autistic or women who are just going through puberty, young girls, and are uncomfortable, that this is the best option for them, when in the vast number of cases it is not the right option. It's the right option sometimes, certainly, but not at the rate it's being recommended. That is what the concern is.
Yeah, I think that's for the scientific community to figure out, is what is the proper approach. I think the problem I have is that conservatives who don't believe anyone should ever transition are fear-mongering and making it seem like these are extremely destructive processes medically. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it because they're anti-trans. And that's really dishonest. And I think that infringes on people's personal freedom if you get to the extent of pushing policy in that direction. Mm.
But Elon, that doesn't describe Elon. Because he's saying adults should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies.
But so should children with their doctors and parents.
Yeah, that's where it starts to get a little trickier, because we do put some limits on what children can't consent to sex. Obviously, everyone supports that, and the age at which you can drive a car, vote, drink alcohol. These are all different, and these are somewhat socially determined. Are there some 18-year-olds who should be perfectly? 18-year-olds can vote. Some 18-year-olds who could be trusted to drink responsibly, of course. Are there some 16-year-olds who could be trusted with the right to vote? Sure. But so some of these things are socially determined, that this is the cutoff point at which no one in this category can do or is able to do things. And those definitions end up being not great. But
I think we're at a phase of societal change where everyone's like, oh my God, what? This is so different. And it's time to sit with it and realize a lot of parents make decisions with their children that impact the trajectory of their life in a permanent way all the time. And we need to assess in a moral way, are people getting hurt? What direction? What's the risk here? What's the chance of someone being much happier? And people aren't sitting with the moral analysis with a clear mind, because it is so different from everything we've known culturally. But I think we'll get there.
More Rising right after this.
Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, you may have been hearing the term ESG lately. Last Saturday, Elon Musk tweeted, "I'm increasingly convinced that corporate ESG is the devil incarnate." People who follow the Great Reset and the World Economic Forum, such as Glenn Beck, often warn against it and are even encouraging legislation to stop it from being used. But it isn't just those who are against ESG talking about it. You may have seen it in headlines on Bloomberg, MarketWatch, or Forbes. So what is it? Well, ESG stands for Environment, Social, and Corporate Governance. It's similar to a credit score, except rather than being based around a company's revenue and history of paying back debts, the ESG score is centered around sustainability and ethics. It's currently only given to corporations, but I think it's easy to imagine a future where the score is assigned to individuals as well. Now, the system was set up as a way to let investors, quote unquote, invest responsibly. Many people pride themselves on buying only sustainable products and purchasing from ethical companies. So an ESG score, which is widely used by many investment and fund management firms, makes it easy to determine which companies these are. Now, you can invest your money and feel good too. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is the system is subjective to whomever decides what ethical is. Though many people believe the ESG score is about climate change and the environment, the truth is the social and governance aspects of the score have just as much weight, sometimes even more, than a company's environmental impact. So the E obviously stands for environment. That's carbon footprint, pollution, and waste. The S stands for social, which judges things such as how well a company embraces social justice and how diverse a company is. The G stands for governance. Does the company embrace things like a diversity board and who is in charge? Those sound nice enough, except this is just a small list of what goes under each category, and the people deciding what is or isn't ethical, like in most Silicon Valley-based companies, are clearly liberal elites. For example, Tesla, a company that makes electric vehicles, has a moderate to moderately poor score. How can this be? Think whatever you want about Elon Musk. There's no doubt his car company has been a game changer for the environment. Yet somehow, out of the 5 U.S.-based automotive companies like Ford, which make gas-guzzling trucks, Tesla's ESG score is the worst. Why is that? Well, because it turns out what liberal elites think about Elon Musk seems to matter. The scoring system takes into account his eclectic personality, his tendency to tweet whatever he wants, his views on COVID, and his libertarian politics. Try to make sense of this. Lockheed Martin, a company that produces weapons bringing death and destruction upon the planet, has a higher social responsibility score than Tesla. Why is that? Sorry, I don't mean higher. They have a better social responsibility score. It's actually the lower the score, the better it is. So theirs is actually better than Tesla's. Well, it's because ESG scores are based on what neoliberal elites consider to be moral and good. It's good to supply weapons to our so-called friends. They use them to kill bad guys. Never mind the fact that they also kill children. But it's bad to criticize COVID lockdown policies. Never mind the fact you've arguably done more to advance a greener planet, make space travel cheaper, and bring internet to all than any government or organization on Earth. The score is political. So the company reigning at the very top of the ESG scoring list is, believe it or not, Bill Gates founded Microsoft. Are we surprised? So ESG scores determine how much and how easy it is for a company to secure funds and investments. So it's important to have a good score. The better the score, the greater the cash flow. It's why we're seeing companies go woke by regurgitating slogans like Black Lives Matter while hypocritically using prison labor. It's why companies refuse to do business with controversial people and businesses, like when Parler suddenly was dropped from Amazon and Apple. Perhaps it's why GoFundMe dropped the trucker convoy. Despite people thinking these companies make these moves out of some sort of moral signaling, the reality is that many companies don't want to harm their ability to attract investors. They feel forced to make these sort of moves. But who's forcing them? Who's in control of these scores? The people deciding whether or not you are moral and good matters. And I think it's easy to see why this type of moral scoring system can be easily abused. One might think the system is a good idea, it just needs tweaking. But any sort of score that directly ties cash flow to morals and ethics is ripe for abuse. The scores can not only change on a whim based on what the latest woke fad is, but based on what benefits the people in charge. Do we really want neoliberal elites to have the power to compel a company to completely change its ethos in order to raise their scores? This has massive implications for society. Companies are modifying their behavior to ingratiate themselves with those in power. They're changing their slogans and advertisements. They're censoring content. They're firing controversial people. Speak up, you might lose your job because you're bad for the company's ESG score. Here's another example. 10 years ago, Disney's ESG score was considered one of the worst. Now, with all the changes they've made to be more inclusive, such as the commitment to make half of all characters from the LGBTQI+ community, even though they represent only a fraction of the greater population, and made moves to rid themselves, such as right-winger Gina Carano, their score is one of the best. It's right up there with Microsoft. Though the scores haven't been used yet on individuals, we've seen some semblance of it already happening unofficially. It's what cancel culture is based on, but it's become more than just Twitter mobs coming after people. We've seen individuals banned from using social media and services like PayPal and GoFundMe refusing to send payouts to controversial people. They're not doing this because they're morally agreeing with it. They're doing it for their bottom line. Social credit systems are already being implemented in China where good behavior gets rewarded and bad behavior results in societal shunning. ESG scores are the corporate form of this. Even if it never reaches the individual level, the impact it's having on companies ultimately affects us all. It affects which companies survive, what messages companies convey, what content we can consume, and whether or not you have a job. So if what you're doing or saying goes against neoliberal elites, you could find your company going out of business or you yourself without a job. Just curious if you guys, Robbie and Ryan, have you guys heard of ESG scores? This has kind of been making the social media round since Elon kind of came out and said, this is terrible. Obviously, Glenn Beck's been talking about it a lot because it is discussed quite a bit in the World Economic Forum and by Klaus Schwab as the mechanism of the future to kind of push companies and society in the direction that they want. But, obviously, if you're going to base a score off of morality, who gets to decide what the morality is?
Yeah, how do they factor that in? Like, let's say he tweets something that somebody doesn't like. What's the mechanism for that to be factored into a score? Like
credit scores, it's not exactly transparent. So we really don't know what does affect a company's score as much. There are some things that are obvious and they get consultants and consultants will help them figure that out. So for example, if you add recycling bins, like when Disney decided to add recycling bins to their parks, that of course raised their score. But so there are some obvious things, but then there are things that are not as obvious. When it comes to environment, it's a bit more obvious. When it comes to social, it's not as obvious. And when it comes to governance, it's not as obvious as well because they could just not like your CEO and decide, well, then you get a lower score. It's more of just societal perception, and it is based on what the neoliberals believe to be good and bad.
Yeah,
Tesla's gotten sued for race relations in there.
I know very little about this, so I'm just Googling around. The Motley Fool says, this looks it looks like it's incredibly political to me. Like it would be bordering on arbitrary. Not so much for the criteria you just mentioned, Kim. Like if you for environmental adding environmentally friendly options, if that's relevant to your industry, that seems maybe a little less political. But for their governance score, they consider the composition of the board in terms of diversity and independence, executive compensation, business ethics, a lot of things that sound exactly like you described, Kim. Like it could just be like what makes liberal elites happy. Is this woke enough?
Yeah, because you can interpret ethics however you want, right? I mean, so it depends on who's in charge of the scoring system that gets to decide what is ethical, what isn't ethical, what is good social governance, what isn't good social governance. So now this system has been implemented for a while. It's been in use at least, it was developed decades ago. It's been more prominently in use for at least 10 years. Definitely in the early, 2010, 2011, 2012 is when it really started to take hold. And it's become much more prominent now. Pretty much every investment fund firm, money management firm uses these ESG scores. So
and that's what I'd want to know. If they use them, they probably think they're valuable, right? Do investors make more of a return on their investment if they invest in companies? Do companies that have higher or lower, whatever, better ESG scores make more money for the investors than other companies? They'd probably start ignoring them, or maybe they make more money pretending to care about them because it makes woke customers or something happy. I don't know.
It's more like putting lipstick on a pig. It's not exactly, it's like, oh, this just makes you feel good as an investor. You want to invest in companies that are quote unquote socially conscious or responsible or environmentally friendly. And so it's not really, a lot of these companies aren't actually, Lockheed Martin, why do they have a better score than Tesla? Somebody explain that. But it's more about they do little things to kind of boost their score slightly, like Disney, and it just makes investors feel better, but it's not necessary. So yes, there's more money that flows in because if you are managing money, and your investors want to invest in.
But that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm wondering. Do investors see it as valuable? Do they say, oh, this company has a better ESG rating, so we should be more, we should want to invest in this one because this is going to make us more money? Do they see it that way is what I wonder.
I don't think it's about making more money because that company is going to be more profitable. It's more like the investors, the people that are giving them the money want to feel good about their investments.
Right, and they are often political entities themselves.
Right.
So let's say it's a city. So politicians are the ones who are investing the pension fund for the city. Or if it's a teachers union or a firefighters union, you would have people who are saying, like, we should make sure that our investments are ethical. And then the companies and then the investment managers then come up with ways to say, okay, well, these are the same way that you had a lot of climate activists in colleges telling their endowments, we don't want you investing in oil companies.
Right.
And so then these, as a
or we want you to be, what is it, LEED certified or whatever, that I remember that was a big deal.
Right, and so then you have money managers who create products for that. It wouldn't be surprising that the money managers don't actually care and are creating like pretty much arbitrary stuff. Oh, you want good investments? Oh, yeah, these are good. But I also think there's some, I think there's some fairness to saying, like, if you've had a ton of like settlements around harassment and racism in your workplace, that there might be some consumers who want to take that into account, or some investors that want to take that into account when they're deciding whether not to invest. So I think, because from a kind of socialist perspective, it's like, look, you've already told socialists that they can't democratically control how investment is done in society.
I have told them that.
Right, you told them that. And you tell them, look, but you're free to make your own choices about how investments are made. And then if they organize and start directing it, so, well, not like that. So but I think Kim's right that she's flagged like a lot of flaws in how this is done, but I think the principle, if you're not going to allow democratic control of capital investment, then people still do have a right to organize around the idea of how you invest money in society.
Sure,
but they definitely have a right. Yeah, we're just, well, I'm not putting words in Kim's mouth,
and we have a right to say the way you're doing it is kind of silly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, this is putting a score. It's almost like putting a scarlet letter on somebody who is bad, right? Because if you have a bad score, then it's like you're getting a scarlet letter. So, I mean, we have to, yes, I understand the principle of it that, okay, I would like to know which companies are socially responsible and which ones I want to, which ice cream do I want to buy? Do I want to buy Ben & Jerry's, or do I want to buy, some other company that maybe doesn't share the same values as I do, right? We have that ability to make those choices as a consumer, as an individual, of course. But the problem is that these ESG scores are not about the people organizing. This is about neoliberal elites organizing, and they decide these scores. And then they're telling us this is who is good and who is bad.
Often it's people organizing, but then the people's organizing work is being co-opted and channeled by those neoliberal elites, which is the story of our lives.
Story of our lives. All right, thank you, Kim. Tomorrow on Rising, journalist Manny Marotta will be here to break down the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war.
And Layla Dalton, the Starbucks union leader who was recently fired by the company, will be with us to discuss her experience and her efforts to unionize.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And be sure to check out our podcast. We've got podcasts wherever podcasts are available. So be sure to share and subscribe that as well. And also find us on TikTok. I think we're everywhere now, right? We're like TikTok, podcasts.
Everywhere. Can't avoid us.
You cannot avoid us. You cannot escape.
You could suspend us.
Please don't try. For now, we're everywhere until we get ourselves in trouble again. We'll try not to do that, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to Rising. So much news to get to today on this Wednesday morning. Hello, Brianna.
Hello, Robbie.
What do we have up first?
Well, NPR has had it with Elon Musk's shenanigans and has become the first major news organization to leave Twitter after billionaire Elon Musk's acquisition of the site. This comes after NPR was given the label state-affiliated media and then subsequently labeled government-funded media after some backlash. NPR claims the amended label is inaccurate and misleading misleading given that NPR is a private nonprofit company with editorial independence. It receives less than 1% of its $300 million annual budget from the federally funded Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
NPR's official statement reads that the site under Musk is taking action that undermine our credibility, and we are not putting our journalism on platforms that have demonstrated an interest in undermining our credibility. So, a lot of people threaten to quit Twitter and, in fact, get made fun of because they never really do. No one quits Twitter. They come back after a few minutes. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of temper tantrum. Yeah. I will say, however, given all the kind of dysfunction going on, the platform, to my mind, is offering less value, and we're going to talk about this a little later. But even the value is providing in terms of the disclosures and revelations regarding the previous ownership, the Twitter files. Now that's been it looks like it might no longer happen because of the feud that Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi have had. So. Maybe it's becoming less of a curated news feed. I can understand news agencies thinking they're getting less value out of it. I understand NPR, we talked about this, being upset specifically about the state-affiliated label. The government-funded label is, sorry, it's technically accurate.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I don't know what you want to say about it.
I think that's fine as long as it's also evenly applied. So part of the concern was that the BBC was being treated differently from NPR, was being treated differently from RT, and the metrics by which those decisions are being made were very opaque and inconsistent. Now, if BBC and all of these other channels are also being described as government-funded media, I think that would be okay. But as I understand it, NPR was being really called out in a way that felt like an ideological sort of punishment from Elon Musk, who has been very open about his opposition to left politics.
And the rules are just no longer clear. Things are changing day to day. We were told we were all going to lose our blue check marks unless you paid for it. Here was the date you had to do that by. People didn't do it. That date passed. Then your blue check mark now says, well, you subscribe to it or your legacy, making it sound like they're not getting rid of it. It's something different every day.
Yeah, and
I think it's undermining. I don't think Elon is doing a good job of establishing that, of just setting a new agenda and saying, okay, you wanted fair, transparent rules that are the same for everyone, no bias, censorship, etc. Here are the rules, abide by them. It's just something different every day. It seems to change based on his whims, his mercurial nature.
Right. There was this new tag that I know that at least POTUS had gotten it, that was supposed to be like this verification other icon that appeared next to your name. And people were saying, well, this was supposed to be the initial purpose of the verification check, which of course now Elon Musk has tried to make into a profit-generating mechanism. It isn't generating very much profit. He's losing a great deal of profit on the advertising side of things, and people are increasingly asking, what's the point of all of this? Speaking, of course, of the BBC, however, Musk was recently interviewed by a reporter from that organization and was asked about the so-called rise of hateful content on Twitter. This was just last night. Let's watch some of that conversation.
Hang on a second. You said you've seen more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying...
I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's false.
No, what I claimed...
You just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my feed or not... I mean, right, and
literally
if you look at something like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK, they will say that. So
look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a single example, and you can't name one.
Right.
This reporter perhaps apprenticed under that other British reporter who had interviewed Jordan Peterson all those years back.
Oh, I remember her.
So you're saying... and they're like, no, I never said that. I don't think that. Yeah, what you're saying is it was that kind of just failure to... He didn't do his homework.
He wasn't prepared.
He came at Elon with an accusation that he absolutely could not back up. And I have to say, by the way, that of all the... we're being pretty critical of Twitter right now. Of all the things people are saying about Twitter, the one I
seems to me to have the least validity is that there's like more hate or something. I have not noticed that and I'm a heavy user, and I have not noticed that whatsoever.
Yeah,
but.
I gotta say, this is just anecdotal. People who are more into different sorts of communities or who have different algorithms can feel free to disagree. I also have not noticed a change in the kind of hatefulness of my feed. Generally speaking, this reporter was terrible. So to be clear, this was a Twitter Spaces. I listened to this on Twitter Spaces. I didn't watch it. And after this is an important fact because at a certain point, the interviewer literally pooped out, said, I'm out of questions. He has one of the richest men in the world sitting in front of him, someone who has been at the center of any number of scandals, any number of news-making events, who he never asked about the Twitter files until prompted by other people in the chat at the end of the call. But basically at a certain point said, well, I guess I'm done here. I've been beat up enough and I've embarrassed myself enough. He didn't say that, but like that was the subtext. And he just says, should I just pack up around you? Should I just pack up and leave? And now I'm seeing them on the set. Apparently he just gathered his things and left, and Elon continued the call and talked to some of his other online friends, Ian Miles Chong and some others in the chat for another 20 minutes or so. Eventually I hung up. But throughout the interview, the interviewer clearly had an agenda, which is fine. I have my critiques of the website as well. But instead of asking more pointed questions about the functionality, being able to push back when Elon gave a lot of non-answers or joke answers, he simply seems not to have the preparedness, the self-esteem, the confidence, I don't know what, to actually make this a good interview. And as soon as Elon Musk kind of understood that, he ran ramshod over this guy, and it was so cringe.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, you have to be prepared for that kind of interview. And, and I think people have criticized Elon for only talking to people who agree with him, friendly, conservative type people, alternative media type people. But there he was doing an interview with a BBC reporter.
Well, it started off pretty friendly, and the topics at the top of the call were about some of the BBC affiliation stuff, and they talked about how it was a very impromptu setup, a very impromptu interview, and it wasn't clear if maybe it was part of negotiations around BBC, how BBC was going to be handling the labeling on the app. The conversation started off relatively friendly. There were some questions about whether or not there was going to be a new CEO of Twitter. Elon Musk responded in very Elon Musk fashion, saying, well, there is a new CEO. And the reporter, because I think, again, he wasn't very prepared, seemed to be caught off guard, unsure if maybe he had just missed a news item, and said, who is this new CEO? He said, oh, it's my dog. It's my Shiba Inu, who's in the icon, who's the new CEO. And they laughed about it. And the reporter just failed to have follow-ups. Okay, Elon Musk was going to make his corny dad jokes, but you have to have follow-ups. Elon Musk averred that he was going to step down as president of Twitter. He has not done so. When he asked who he thought would make a good replacement president of Twitter, Elon Musk said, well, what do you think? And the report says, well, I'm not the one who's in the position to make that sort of decision, but he never ultimately nailed him down, followed up, spoke to the fact that on his own website, he did a poll asking if he should step down, and his own followers ostensibly told him the answer was yes. There was so much there. To have never asked about the Twitter files. The biggest story of the moment, the guy who says he bought the app for First Amendment reasons, having this breakdown with his own journalists where Matt Taibbi has left the app to not bring up any questions about the Mehdi Hassan interview and whether or not, there was a question about whether he was somewhat hypocritical and how he dealt with speech issues in other countries. And Elon Musk very straightforwardly said, in other countries, I'm going to follow their laws, speech be damned, which I think is an honest moment, but something that he didn't interrogate at all, and which I think most of the fans of Elon Musk aren't going to really pick up from this interview or say anything about. But I do strongly recommend that people watch the whole thing.
That, by the way, is not unique, honestly, to Elon Musk.
No,
That's something all tech companies have had to grapple with as they try to
get into companies like India, China, etc.
What's unique is that Elon Musk has represented himself as something different than someone who just follows the rules of the country they're in. That is Elon Musk, who has portrayed himself as having different sorts of standards.
Well, I don't think it necessarily violates a commitment to free speech to say that, as long as you establish that, like, look, these rules are not ideal, and I don't support them, but I think it's better for the people. What maximizes speech? Is it to refuse to do business, to like not negotiate, refuse to make your product available in a repressive country unless you can offer it under, the full terms of, I think that's a hard question. Like, are the people of China better off without Google at all? Google should say, no, we're a free speech American company. They want us to censor information about Winnie the Pooh. We refuse to do it. No Google in China. I understand that that's a very principled stance. Is that better for anyone?
I think those are good questions. They're questions this journalist did not ask. There was a question about whether he supported a TikTok ban. Elon seemed to have never considered it at all. He said, he was reasoning on the spot. Well, I guess maybe TikTok is a competitor. I don't really use TikTok, so it would be good for me if TikTok were banned. But on the other hand, I suppose I'm against banning of things, so I guess I would say no, TikTok shouldn't be banned. It was all over the place. Watch it for yourselves, guys. Let us know what you think.
You know who should be the new CEO of Twitter?
Who?
Jack Dorsey. Those were the good old days. More Rising after this. Good morning and welcome to Rising. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are here delivering the news on this Monday morning following the Super Bowl, which always feels to me, Niall, like it should be a day off, but it is not a holiday, so here we are.
There is no day of rest, no rest from the news, lots to talk about even after the Super Bowl, which we'll get to at some point in today's show. But first of all, Robbie, what's on your radar?
Well, we'll save our Super Bowl takes for a little bit later, but first, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is just getting started, and their latest plan could be to empower former Congressman Ron Paul, the godfather of the libertarian movement, to audit the Federal Reserve. Now, in a post on X, Musk responded to a friendly comment asserting that Doge should pick Paul to do just that, audit the Fed. In response, Musk said, "Good idea." Now, Senator Mike Lee went further, calling on President Donald Trump to name Ron Paul to be chairman of the Federal Reserve. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the Libertarian Party is obviously very excited at the possibility of Paul being involved whatsoever, tweeting that Paul auditing the Fed would be a, quote, nation-changing event. Libertarian activists have long advocated for an audit of the Federal Reserve since Ron Paul first proposed such a plan years and years ago. In fact, Paul has been pushing this issue since 1981. But what does it mean? Simply put, auditing the Federal Reserve operating behind a cloak of mysteries would demystify some of that. The U.S.'s powerful central bank controls interest rates and ultimately the money supply. But very, very few Americans actually understand how that works. And the Federal Reserve is happy to keep it that way. Brian Doherty, my colleague at Reason Magazine, described the Fed in the following terms for an article about Paul's Audit the Fed legislation. Quote, with its power over interest rates and the supply of U.S. dollars, the Federal Reserve System is the most influential economic institution on the planet. That influence comes surrounded by an impenetrable aura of mystery. Hardly anyone, citizen or congressman, completely understands what the Fed does, how it operates, or what the effects of its actions will be. End quote. Now, the purpose of auditing the Fed is to demystify the institution and allow government auditors from the Government Accountability Organization to open the books, scrutinize its dealings with foreign banks, and better understand why its 7-member board decides to raise and lower interest rates, increase the money supply, and take all sorts of other actions that can cause or lower inflation. Now, many libertarians believe that this is actually the big prize. Cutting government is all well and good, of course, but until and unless the American people have more of a say, or at least more of an understanding of the actions of elite banking institutions to perhaps promote their own self-interest, we won't ever have a responsible monetary policy. If the government can just print more money whenever it wants without disclosing its actions, our fragile economy will ultimately always be in the hands of a small number of unelected bureaucrats. It shouldn't be just right-leaning people, by the way, who are in love with this idea, and it isn't. Progressive foes of powerful financial, unaccountable interests should welcome greater disclosure, and in fact, some of them do. Some left-leaning people have expressed support for Paul's efforts to audit the Fed over the years. In fact, when Senator Ron Paul's son, proposed such a measure in 2016, Senate Democrats came together to block it, with two exceptions. Tammy Baldwin and, you guessed it, Bernie Sanders supported auditing the Fed. Now, I hope leftists like Sanders continue to offer support for the idea now that it could actually really be happening. I know a lot of people on the left are combative with Musk right now. Musk Doge is, of course, doing a lot of things progressives disagree with. I support them. It's acting to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. I think greater accountability and transparency for financial institutions is actually the holy grail of government reform. This would be a big deal. Let's get it done. Audit the Fed. That's what I say.
I was listening to that with interest, Robbie, because this is a topic that I approach from a kind of place of curiosity rather than antagonism. I know that the slogan Audit the Fed has been not only a Ron Paul slogan, but a kind of a libertarian touchstone for a long time. And I think in principle, in theory, I don't have any problem with any government institutions having more scrutiny imposed upon them. I guess one of the concerns I think a lot of people would have is how you do this without exposing the Fed to political pressure, because there has been a problem not just in the United States, but more so in other places that did not have independent central banks. I mean, it was the case in Britain up until Tony Blair became Prime Minister in the 1990s. The Bank of England was perceived as, I shouldn't say the Bank of England, it was perceived that interest rates were moved according to the political calendar and to try to benefit the party that was in power by lowering interest rates, for example, just before an election. You would then get a kind of feel-good factor, but it would be detrimental to the overall health of the economy and to the stability of the economy. Is that a danger here, that it opens the Fed up to actual political interference?
Maybe, but I know that opponents of the Federal Reserve System would argue that the intention was never to make the Fed wholly independent of political considerations, and I tend to be a little bit suspicious of government entities that assert that they should be so independent that they suffer no political pressure. I mean, it's a democracy. Ultimately, there should be some political pressure, and we reward or punish politicians who exercise such pressure. Now, we wanted the Fed, the intention was to make the Fed independent of the executive so that the president could not exercise such power. But the intention was never to make them wholly independent of Congress's authority. Now, of course, in reality, we're in this weird just situation that our founders and the creators of our system never intended, where Congress and the executive don't share the combative. As branches of government, they are not combative. They are combative if one party, if it's two different parties in control of the two different branches. If it's the same party, they're not combative whatsoever. Congress wants to, for the most part, work to enact whatever the president wants. So we're kind of in tricky territory. Our system's not working the way it should. But if you look at the auditing in particular, it really is a mild proposal. And the kind of auditing that can already be done for the Fed is just wholly inadequate. And GAO, the Government Accountability Office, has said, yeah, we're authorized to do this much auditing, but we can't look at their significant proportions of their financial transactions, the leverage they perhaps exercise on other banks, including European banks. That's all, we're all shut out of that. We can't even look at it. It's so weird. They said we might as well not even do an audit if we're not able to look at this category of transactions and things the Federal Reserve does. So this bill would give them just the same authority they could have to go after any other agency.
But so it would be the GAO who would be doing the auditing,
GAO,
I guess, is the question. And then it would be to a degree insulated from partisan political pressure, even though it would be broadly politically accountable.
Correct. There could be some remedy proposed if it turns up bad stuff, perhaps by Congress. But GAO They do investigations of government agencies. Sometimes I like their conclusions. Sometimes I don't agree with their conclusions. But I think most people respect the work that they do and think it's solid, and then you can interpret it however you like. But that would be the first step, and that's why this measure has in the past drawn some support, as I said, from people like Bernie Sanders. The idea was percolating again on Twitter over the weekend because Elon responded to Ron Paul, get him back in there. Ron Paul is very elderly at this point in time and is retired from Congress, and I think is enjoying his retirement. So I don't want to necessarily disturb him if he said his time has passed, but someone of a Ron Paul spirit to get in there and help see what's going on under the hood would be something that warms my heart, tickles my fancy, does all sorts of things to me.
Maybe Ron Paul could focus on another presidential run, of which he has made either 2 or 3 or more, I think, at this stage, but perhaps the time has passed.
Perhaps the time has passed, but I've always appreciated what he's done for my ideas in public discourse.
Some of the world's wealthiest figures are currently in the Swiss town of Davos for the World Economic Forum's meeting that started yesterday. Many online commentators have claimed that the event involves a group of elites manipulating global events for their own gain. According to AP, experts say what was once a conspiracy theory found throughout the internet's underground has now hit the mainstream.
The theme of the meeting in 2020 was called The Great Reset, which envisioned how changes could be implemented to build a more sustainable future. This theme has been referenced by many well-known names, including Fox News' Tucker Carlson and Sandy Hook denier Alex Jones, who largely view the plan as an elite conspiracy to consolidate world power and implement control over society. But Twitter Files journalist Michael Schellenberger tweeted yesterday, spokespersons for the World Economic Forum say the Great Reset, eating insects instead of meat, and you'll own nothing and be happy are conspiracy theories, but they're not. In fact, all of them originated at Davos and from the World Economic Forum's own website. Now, WEF is deleting those, of course. This article that was reportedly on the website in 2016 has since been deleted, says, welcome to 2030, I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. I wanted to talk about this because, so this is getting the kind of mainstream media spin of, oh, look at all these people criticizing Davos and the World Economic Forum. They're spreading misinformation and conspiracy theories. If you're upset about this, you are yourself a conspiracy theorist. It's all just conspiracies. And yes, if you get into the granular details, are some people saying things about the World Economic Forum, they're not representing its views correctly. I mean, it doesn't even have views. It is a gathering of heads of state and business leaders and influential people from all over the world who have a variety of different agendas and don't internally agree. So there's not one agenda they're putting forth. But some of the things they talk about in terms of environmentalism, in terms of state surveillance, state capacity, the kinds of governments run by these very people, what they'll be able to do to you, the kind of social credit score system, tracking, kind of nudging. It's for your health. It's for your own good. It's a very kind of soft, dystopian progressive. Look, it's not, again, as I said last time we talked about this, some of these ideas might be fine, but it is also fine to be critical of it, to not like that you're not invited, that it's a secret meeting, semi-secret meeting of elites, and you might not like all these policies. Maybe they'll involve outsourcing, and maybe they're too deferential to China's new hegemony, all that stuff. That is fine. It is not a conspiracy theory to object to that, to speak out against it. No, certainly not.
And I think it is healthy for, look, I remember not so long ago, living in a world where there was kind of more of an open embrace of and an almost admiration for a certain kind of elitism. I think coming out of the Bush era and into the Obama era, there was this idea that we're going to leave like the dumb Neanderthals behind and that all the problems in the world could be solved by the right technocratic brain that went to Harvard and attended Davos, right? And that was part of the appeal of Obama. And I think the Obama years disabused a lot of people of the notion that that was going to be the fix. However, I think the part of it that's a little frustrating from a left perspective is, more people should be interrogating why it is that the kinds of solutions that are coming out of Davos do seem so dystopian for many of us. For those of us who believe that there is a climate crisis, who understand that there have been famines and droughts as a consequence of environmental change, and also because of war driving immigration across the country, all kinds of displacements, a third of Pakistan underwater this year, wildfires in California, that these are things that are happening. whatever you want to attribute them to, say, well, obviously we have to do some planning about how to maintain resources, how to grow enough food to feed the world, and all these other kinds of things. The war in Ukraine obviously impacted grain supplies, et cetera. Now, why is it that the solutions always seem to be we all eat bugs? Well, part of it is that the changes that would be more equitable and less severe for the broader public come at the expense of the very, very wealthy. Are you going to be able to graze endless rounds of beef so that all the people who eat a steak every day for lunch can continue to eat a steak every day for lunch? Or are we going to turn some of that pasture land into agricultural land so that the rest of us don't have to eat bugs? And these are the kind of trade-offs that aren't being discussed in the pernicious motives of corporations and people who are very, very elite who want to aggregate all of the wealth at the very, very top without making any sacrifices themselves, while we're all at the back of the Snowpiercer train eating bug gelatin. You know, that is the real problem here. And I hope that some of this stuff moves from, oh, it's just crunchy green liberals who want you to eat bugs. No, the people at that conference aren't crunchy green liberals. They're people who know that there's a limit on their economic oil investments because these are not infinite sources.
They have crunchy liberal social views and,
sure.
and
well, even worse
enrich
than that.
me corporate economic views.
Yes, but even worse, I think that some of them don't even have those social views, but they do use those social views to launder their bad practices. And this has been happening with the weaponization of identity politics. This is happening by putting a woke flag on a lot of things that are really pernicious. But again, I don't think it's not the wokeness that's the problem. It's not black people or trans people or gay people or anything that's the problem. It's people like this who exploit the existence of those groups and legitimate historical persecution that they've had to endure to launder a bunch of same old corporate practices. To that end, the charity organization Oxfam, which focuses on alleviating global poverty, made a plea to the leaders at Davos that the number of billionaires should be reduced by half by 2030 in a report titled Survival of the Richest. Twitter CEO Elon Musk weighed in on the WEF's plan to incorporate, quote, environmental, social, and governance criteria into its investment strategy, quipping that the S stands for satanic. What do you make of this? Is it just a billionaire being big mad that billionaires have a target on their back, or does he have a point here?
I don't know why it's like satanic. It's that is a kind of a type of criticism I see from some on the right that to impute to the elites that it's all like it's literal Satanism or literal. Hillary Clinton is slipping down, right? Eating children, drinking the blood of children, that kind of thing. Like, no, just say. Then people don't take you seriously when you say that because that sounds crazy and is like 99% untrue. Of course, there was actually a Jeffrey Epstein cavorting with rich and powerful people and actually engaged in sex trafficking, sexual abuse of underage. Like every now and then, the what sounds like, well, that's too crazy. Your criticism that's too far out there is true. Every now and then it is true, but mostly no. They're not sacrificing children in pagan rituals. They are discussing policies that they think would be good for society and would especially be good for them and making more money for their corporations and enriching the governments represented. And some of those policies might be worth implementing, but we all get to decide. America is a democratic republic where we have elected representatives. We don't have to go along with what they say in Davos. It should be told to the American people, and they get to weigh these policies, and it should be what's good for everyone, not just what's good for the elites.
Let's interrogate the idea that we're a democracy, because based on polls...
Ideally, that's what I'm not saying we actually are.
But here's the issue. Obviously, some edict that comes out from Davos or from Oxfam, nobody's following. These are all advisory or whatever. But the conversation about how many billionaires there should be. So notably, the number of billionaires that exist has gone up exponentially. There were 500 new billionaires minted during the 2020 economic crisis, which a lot of people found to be disturbing given how much the rest of the world was suffering. There's a heightened awareness of the fact that there is a relationship between how many people are poor and how many people are rich, and these things are happening in tandem. And when you look at root causes, there are a lot of things that people point to. For example, the average CEO pay versus worker pay has exploded over the last 40 years or so. In the middle of the last century, in the 1950s, 60s, it was something like a 1-to-30 ratio. The earnings of a CEO versus the worker. Now it's closer to 1-to-300. I think it's actually edging closer to 1-to-400 ratio. We've seen jobs shipped overseas. We've seen workers get a smaller share of the pie. We've seen union density lower, and so workers can't advocate for the wages that they used to be able to earn. And so you're getting more and more wealth aggregated at the top. Now, that's no surprise then, maybe, that a wealth tax, when polled, is very, very popular. We don't get a wealth tax in terms of legislation, however, perhaps because people like Elon Musk and other billionaires who give enormous amounts to these presidential campaigns, Joe Biden took more billionaire money than anybody else in the race, including Donald Trump, have no incentive to actually do anything about having the number of billionaires, or at least limiting the idea that billionaires are able to extract so much wealth at a period of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, here you and I will probably have some real disagreements. I don't have any desire to have fewer billionaires like in a vacuum. Like the number of billionaires there are doesn't bother me. If people are making billions of dollars legitimately, not with subsidies, not with cheats, and there's a lot of that going on, and we both agree on getting rid of that. If they're doing it by providing value to society, by providing food and clothing and services that people want to buy, and that's how they get rich, that's fine with me. You probably disagree with this. I don't think just because more people have a lot more, sometimes that means other people have less. Doesn't always. I mean, the global poverty rate has fallen over the last 100 years dramatically, right? It hasn't, largely because of the third world getting better, et cetera. Maybe there's been some stagnation in our own country or in the developed world. By and large, the period of extreme growth in the billionaire class has not coincided with massive global poverty.
It takes very little to raise someone who's living on $1 a day to $2 a day. It doesn't require that much distributional change to bring because things are just so bad, to bring the very bottom up out of poverty. I don't mean to minimize that accomplishment.
Twice as much income is huge.
Right. I don't mean to minimize that accomplishment, but that doesn't undermine the reality that the wealth aggregation that we've seen over the last 50 years is a direct result of economic policy. People didn't just start inventing cooler products that consumers wanted to consume more. There are real economic underpinnings to how this kind of thing happens. So again, if everyone could be a billionaire, obviously I'd love that. If everybody could be, if there could be
there are no
billionaires
under feudalism, right? Where everyone is. I mean, a couple people have land, but don't have anything like the opulent wealth of today's billionaires. And everyone else is really poor, and society's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a very good example. I don't know how many gold coins or whatever equals $1 billion, but those huge aggregations of wealth among very, very few people and families is exactly the system that many people like, Yanis Varoufakis calls it a techno-feudalism, I believe, the system that we are heading to right now with these huge tech giants aggregating all of this wealth and power that they're using per the Twitter files to control democracy, to advance their own financial interests, to suppress criticism of China if your business is there, as people have accused Elon Musk of doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's worth discussing, and I'm glad Davos is opening up that particular conversation. I just hope that it gets a little deeper than accusing people of, drinking kid blood and wanting to put.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite bug dish?
I don't think I've ever had bug.
I don't think I have either.
Lobster. I mean, it's kind of a bug if we really want to talk about it. But you guys aren't ready for that.
An arthropod, right? It's a crustacean, and insects are a different thing. Remember the classification?
All right. Every insect and fly bee. I was a bio major. All right. We'll have more rising after this.
This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy. Chainsaw!
Elon Musk now expressing some regret for that infamous chainsaw-wielding appearance alongside Argentinian President Javier Milei at CPAC back in February. In the months since then, Musk has been critical of Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill and vocal about continuing Doge's mission of slashing waste, fraud, and abuse. But one of Musk's recent budget-related social media blitzes prompted a user on X to tear into him on his own platform. In response to one of Musk's posts, that user wrote, "Maybe you shouldn't have taken the chainsaw on stage and acted a fool. Maybe you could have gotten more done if you weren't so worried about looking cool." Musk responded minutes later, quote, "Valid point. Milei gave me the chainsaw backstage and I ran with it. But in retrospect, it lacked empathy."
Following that response from the billionaire, some on social media have pointed out the irony of Musk's apparent regret after the indiscriminate and often callous cuts made under his leadership at Doge. And these comments he made on Joe Rogan's podcast just 8 days after he made the appearance at CPAC.
The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. they're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. So, and I think empathy is good, but you need to think it through.
So, as regular viewers of this show know, I find Elon Musk a rather tiresome figure in lots of ways, and I'm glad that he has now rediscovered the capacity for empathy, or feels that his chainsaw antics were lacking in empathy. I certainly think they were. I'm slightly skeptical of his regret, because it's very much in line with that sort of outlandish persona that he has, and the propensity to make these sort of performative moments. The Joe Rogan clip, I think, was important, because the more serious issue I have with Musk is these criticisms he makes of empathy in the past, or has made of empathy in the past. And it wasn't just with Joe Rogan. He has a number of times talked about a type of empathy that he regards as suicidal, was one comment. He has said that European leaders are too empathetic. He is concerned that a certain type of empathy is a civilizational risk. So he then, having said those things, seems to try to differentiate between some kind of empathy that he likes and some kind of empathy that he dislikes. I find that casting of empathy as a bad thing very damaging, actually, particularly since he's a very influential figure to those people who like him more than I do. And he has 220 million followers on X. And that derision toward empathy, I think, has been harmful.
I actually really like the comments that he made on Joe Rogan, because I do think that there's a such thing as toxic empathy, where your regard for the feelings of others above all else does turn to harmful policy outcomes. And when he's talking about Europe, of course, he's mentioning the migrant crisis, which has led to skyrocketing rapes in places like Sweden, and crime, and really made those countries fundamentally different from the way that they used to be, in ways that are really damaging for people who live there. And toxic empathy when it comes to things like maybe criminal justice reform or illegal immigration and how you deal with the border. So I do think that there is a tendency sometimes for political leaders to go overboard on empathy. Now, all of that being said, on the point about what is the motivation for him saying this now, right? I mean, I do think he's trying to rehabilitate his image to an extent now that he has this sort of ongoing feud with Donald Trump. He's been attacking the big, beautiful bill. Maybe he feels like Republicans aren't going to be his biggest champions anymore, and he's trying to develop a new coalition so that he can continue to have political influence.
Sure. So a couple of things there. In relation to the empathy question, one of the things that frustrates me about Musk is, you mentioned about his reference to Europeans. The picture that he paints, particularly about the United Kingdom, which I can speak about with more knowledge than the rest of Europe, is just completely divorced from reality in its sort of dystopian ideas about what exactly is going on there, and no-go areas and all of that. I just don't accept that the characterization he brings to it is even remotely accurate. Now, the broader question, I think, which is an important one, is the one you raised about why he's saying this now. And I take the point that he has become somewhat distanced, or at least has become more willing to be at odds with the MAGA coalition. I think, obviously, that is his right to do that, but I wonder at what level that is driven somewhat by business concerns as well, because obviously we've seen Tesla suffer pretty badly falling sales. And, at risk of being too cliched, electric vehicles tend to appeal to a more liberal-minded, environmental-minded market. And his political activism obviously hurt those sales and hurt that brand with the people who are its target market.
There's also a response to this chainsaw admitting of the mistake from Steve Bannon, who said,
excellent.
All hype, never cut a single penny. So, I mean, he's been an Elon skeptic since the beginning, and he feels like Doge was a massive failure, which I think to an extent it was, right? Because, okay, they're having a rescissions bill apparently coming towards Congress after they pass the BBB, but it's a minuscule amount compared to the cuts that Doge supposedly identified. Right. And Elon's behavior in the White House of stepping on toes and wanting too much power and apparently annoying Trump ultimately led to his downfall.
No, absolutely. And as Musk always does, he massively overhyped Doge as well, at one point suggesting $2 trillion in cuts. At the most, it's going to end up, I think, 160 million or so.
President Trump vowing to make New York City hot again. Hear more on that next.
An online campaign to boycott the streaming giant Netflix went viral this week. Several prominent right-wing figures are accusing the company of promoting LGBTQ agendas in its shows that are geared towards children. Much of the attention is on a series called Dead End Paranormal Park, a children's horror comedy show where one of the main characters says that he is transgender.
The show ran for 2 seasons on Netflix, but was canceled in 2023. The movement to boycott the platform gained traction when Elon Musk promoted posts about the show on X, urging people to cancel their subscriptions. With Musk himself saying, quote, Netflix is deliberately choosing to pay people to create sexualized content for children. Freedom of speech should be respected, but this is paid speech. Netflix is going out of their way and reaching into their wallet to push this. Conservative commentator Benny Johnson writes on X, what Netflix is doing goes beyond a culture war fight. It's immoral and it should be illegal.
One of the show's writers, Bridie Lee Kennedy, came out in defense of the show and had a sarcastic response on Blue Sky. She writes, quote, wow, all the hours we spent in the writer's room brainstorming how to appeal to fascist billionaires. Wasted. She also says, quote, shout out to the anti-cancel culture brigade for trying to cancel our show 3 years after it was canceled. Cancel early, cancel often.
Netflix itself has not offered an official response. The company's stock did take a bit of a hit this week, dropping by about 5% from Tuesday to Thursday. And I believe there's also some controversy around the show CoComelon, which apparently had a character that was a young child who apparently identified as transgender or was being talked to about gender identity issues. And to me, this is how this should work. If you see a show on a streaming service that you don't want your children exposed to, or you think that they have gone too far in creating, then you get to vote with your dollars and you can choose not to buy that subscription.
The timing for me, this is so weird. Like setting CoComelon aside, because I don't know enough about that to understand it. My kid doesn't really watch CoComelon. I mean, not for any reason. It's fine. But with this show, it got canceled in 2023, and Elon Musk is like pulling it out of the woodworks. 2023 is also the exact year that he tweeted and offered to pay the legal bills of anybody who was fired for their posts on X, which was him being anti-cancel culture. And this is now the second time this year that he's rallying things or platforms or shows or people who post about Charlie Kirk to be canceled. And so I think that no matter what the subject is and how sensitive it was, because I agree that private employers should certainly let people go with extreme views like that on death. But Elon Musk jumping into the cancel conversation is so absurd to me when he was one of the biggest and loudest voices about anti-cancel culture. At the same time, I also and because I have a production company, I know and am friendly with many people at Netflix, and this is a worldwide platform. So they're aggregating content, have unscripted leadership, have scripted leadership that aggregate global content. So I know we are like dead set on thinking that everybody cares about America and what they're looking for and what everyone thinks an American household and what the contentious conversations are happening within our government around transgender people. But they create content to air around the world, like Squid Games, created by, I believe, an Asian director that's been pitching this for years, and it translated worldwide when it wasn't even shot in America. I think that people need to understand that Netflix is not trying to cater to the current political climate in the U.S. They're buying content they think that will resonate around the world. I know this because we've talked about shows that surround basketball, and the head of Netflix is telling me, listen, basketball is really popular in the U.S. Bring me a show about football, meaning the one that you kick around, what we call soccer. That's a worldwide concept that resonates on our platform. So people and Americans and Republicans have to stop thinking that the sun sets on their behind and somebody was thinking about them, and understand that there's several different content that they're aggregating, buying that's already created, that's aired other places, or creating originally that has nothing to do with trying to be political. They just are licensing a wide net of content.
Yeah, so I wanted to address the point you brought up about cancel culture and Elon Musk, because I do think that there's degrees to what we consider cancel culture. And to me, one of the primary issues with it, and I know we've discussed this before, is that people were not being fired for having opinions that were beyond the pale, meaning celebrating an assassination or encouraging kids to transition. They were being canceled for having very anodyne, right-of-center political opinions. And I'll just tell you an example. Like, I was fired from a radio show because I made fun of Kamala Harris's outfit at the State of the Union, and people started rallying around and calling me racist and saying that I was attacking her skin color, and I lost my job because of that. So to me, that's cancel culture, not a parent saying, I don't want my kid to watch this show, and I don't think Netflix should air it because it's harmful for kids, so I'm going to cancel my subscription.
Well, I think, this is all like putting Charlie Kirk's assassination aside, because that's a death, right? Again, I agreed with you there. But I think that with like somebody saying they don't want a mention, I haven't seen the show, but if somebody is just saying out loud, I'm a transgender character in that show, that's one thing. They're not doing a sexual act, they're not sexualizing, they said a statement, right? If that exists. And then separately, if that offends you deeply, if somebody is being racist online, I think they should also be canceled and get fired from their job. And that's happened multiple occasions on my end. I'm posting and people are just literally writing racist, antiquated stuff. So they should get fired. But I also don't think
I wasn't being racist.
No, I wasn't saying, no, I'm not complaining that to you. I'm using an example about you saying that cancel culture for the right is different. Like, I'm saying there are people, I don't know if they're left or right, I know that they're disrespectful and that somebody shouldn't want somebody in their workplace that is racist. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that's happened to me. Yeah, I want to separate. I'm not saying that you are. I'm saying that's happened to me on my end where people literally are being racist, like using the N-word, right? So then they shouldn't also have their job. So, but I'm also agree with Elon Musk that we should not just be canceling folks. I don't like you, I'm going to block you. But I also don't know that you need to lose your job. That's your job's choice. If I feel like reporting it.
he's not,
He's asking people to cancel, like delete all their subscriptions. And it's like, maybe parents weren't even watching that show.
But I think it's different to say that I don't want my money to prop up a platform that is promoting values that I disagree with. And I think like the left would mostly agree with that, right? Like they had advertiser-led boycotts against Fox News where they said, we're not going to buy like Bic razors if they're advertising on Tucker Carlson's show. And that's a way to vote with your dollars, right? And conservatives did it with Bud Light and Target when they got frustrated with them. Like, to me, that's actually them using their free speech to express disagreement with things that they don't like or value decisions that companies are making. He's not saying that everyone at Netflix needs to be fired for allowing this show to go on. He's just saying if you don't want them to have this content on there, know that your dollars are supporting Netflix, right, through your subscription. So, like, I wouldn't want my money to go to a company that is doing things that I think that are against my values.
The same company, though, is the same company that was attacked from the left for Dave Chappelle's special regarding transgender people that they considered extremely disrespectful and dismissive. Yeah. So the platform has everything for everybody is what I'm saying. Like, so the Netflix should be reinstated for being disrespectful to transgender people. I mean, like, that's what it is. Like, the platform has everything for the world in any taste. And they say, this is under the comedy umbrella. We are not policing Dave Chappelle. And that was their argument back. Whether they respond to this, I guess we'll see. But like, he's nitpicking something from 2 years ago. I'm like, does he have a personal beef with the CEO of Netflix?
People have to decide where their lines are, right? And so people on the left decided that their line was a joke about transgender people, and people on the right decided that their line is a kids show that is encouraging transgenderism or gender ideology as something that they should be accepting of against the parents' wishes. So to me, it's like, well, you have to decide what you're comfortable with or uncomfortable with, and then the public can have a debate over whether or not the thing that you're uncomfortable with you should be uncomfortable with, or if it's worth canceling a subscription. And like, all of those debates are going to play out in real time. Obviously, being of a conservative disposition, I'm more inclined to agree with the parents who don't want their kids to see transgender content than saying making a joke about transgenders is unacceptable.
All right, up next, multiple outlets are reporting that Barry Weiss will head to CBS. We'll be right back.